The social worker's pen made a final scratch across the discharge papers, and that sound, sharp, administrative, final, marked the exact moment I stopped being a ward of the state. 18 years, 3 months, and 12 days in the system, and it all came down to a signature and a handshake that felt too brief for what it was supposed to mean. Mrs. Chun handed me a manila envelope containing my birth certificate, social security card, and $200 in emergency funds, her smile professional and distant. She'd processed hundreds of aging-out kids before me. I was just another Tuesday. The lobby of Riverside Group Homes smelled the same as it had every morning for the past 4 years, industrial cleaner and burnt coffee, but walking out those double doors with my single duffel bag felt like stepping off a cliff. No net. No plan beyond the Greyhound ticket to Sacramento in my pocket, where a transitional housing program had a bed waiting. Maybe. The bus station downtown sprawled across 2 blocks of cracked asphalt and diesel fumes, a transit hub that serviced 3 counties and felt older than time itself. I sat on a metal bench outside the terminal, my duffel at my feet, counting and recounting the emergency money, even though I knew exactly how many bills were there. The November wind cut through my thrift store jacket, but I didn't want to go inside yet. Inside meant acknowledging that this was real, that I was actually leaving the only city I'd ever known, heading toward a future that felt more like a blank wall than a horizon. A woman approached from my left, moving with purpose through the scattered crowd of travelers. She was perhaps 50, with graying blonde hair pulled back in a loose bun and a long tan coat that had seen better days. Her eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made my stomach clench, that particular look people get when they recognize you, but you have no idea who they are. She stopped directly in front of my bench, close enough that I had to look up to meet her gaze. Her face was worn but kind, etched with lines that spoke of years lived hard. "Ava Winters," she said, and it wasn't a question. My mouth went dry. Nobody knew I was here. I told exactly 0 people which bus I was taking or when. "I knew your mother," the woman continued, her voice rough around the edges like she didn't use it often. "Rachel. I was her best friend before everything happened." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a large envelope, the kind lawyers use for important documents. Her hands trembled slightly as she held it out to me. "She wanted you to have this when you turned 18. I've been waiting a long time to give it to you." I stared at the envelope like it might explode. My mother was a ghost, a name on a piece of paper, a woman who died in a car accident when I was 6 months old. That's what I'd been told my entire life. That's what was written in my file. Single vehicle collision, no other family, infant placed into state care. End of story. "What is this?" I managed to ask, my voice barely audible over the rumble of an arriving bus. The woman pressed the envelope into my hands with surprising force, her fingers cold even through the paper. "A farm. It's yours. Your name is on the deed. Everything you need is in there. Address, legal documents, keys." She stepped back before I could ask anything else, before I could even process what she'd just said. "She loved you so much, Ava. More than you'll ever know. The farm will help you understand." I tried to stand, tried to call after her, but she was already moving away, weaving through the crowd with practiced efficiency. "Wait," I shouted, but she didn't turn back. Within seconds, she disappeared around the corner of the terminal building, swallowed by the stream of travelers and idling buses. I looked down at the envelope in my hands, my name written across the front in neat, unfamiliar handwriting. My fingers shook as I tore it open. Inside was a property deed, official and stamped, listing me, Ava Marie Winters, as the sole owner of a 40-acre farm at 4782 County Road 19, Elmwood, Oregon. The property value was listed at $800,000. The deed was dated 2 weeks ago, but the transfer section was blank. No previous owner listed. No transfer date. Just my name and a notary seal. There were also 2 keys on a simple metal ring, a hand-drawn map showing the route from Highway 101 to County Road 19, and a short note written on plain white paper. "The house has everything you need. You were always meant to go home. L." That was it. No explanation. No phone number. No way to find the woman who'd just upended my entire reality and walked away. I sat there on that bench for an hour, maybe more, watching buses come and go while I tried to make sense of what had just happened. The deed looked legitimate. Raised seals, official stamps, legal language that seemed real. But it didn't make sense. How could I own a farm? How could my mother, who supposedly died 18 years ago, have left me anything? How could this woman have known I'd be here, at this station, at this exact time? The rational thing would have been to get on my bus to Sacramento, to stick with the plan, to treat this as some elaborate scam or mistake. But I hadn't felt anything close to rational since those double doors closed behind me at Riverside. The farm was in Elmwood, a town I'd never heard of, about 300 miles north along the coast. My phone showed me it was tiny, population 700 and change, situated in timber country where the mountains met the sea. It would take most of my emergency money to get there, buying a different ticket, taking a series of rural buses that only ran twice a day. If this was a scam, I'd be stranded in the middle of nowhere with maybe $40 and no backup plan. If it was real, I'd have a home, an actual home, with my name on it. I bought the ticket north. The journey took 14 hours, switching buses 3 times, traveling through landscapes that shifted from valley farmland to dense forest to glimpses of gray ocean between the trees. I tried to sleep, but couldn't stop thinking about that woman's face, the way she'd said my mother's name. Rachel. Like she actually knew her, like she carried memories of a real person instead of the hollow ghost I'd grown up with. The note haunted me too. You were always meant to go home. Home implied something I'd never had. The group homes and foster placements of my childhood were temporary by definition, places to exist until you aged out or moved on. Home meant permanence. Home meant belonging. Home meant someone had planned for you to be there. The final bus dropped me in Elmwood just after 9 at night, at a gas station that doubled as the town's only commercial hub. The clerk inside, a tired woman with kind eyes, gave me directions when I showed her the hand-drawn map. "Oh sure, the old Winters place," she said, recognition flickering across her face. "Haven't seen anyone out there in years, but the property's maintained. Someone pays to keep the utilities on and the land managed." She studied me with open curiosity. "You family?" I nodded, unable to form a more complete answer. She didn't press, just wished me luck and pointed me toward the county road. I walked the 3 miles in darkness, my duffel growing heavier with each step, following the map by phone light. The road was narrow and unpaved past the first mile, cutting through stands of Douglas fir that blocked out the stars. The ocean was out there somewhere to the west. I could smell the salt and hear the distant percussion of waves, but the trees made the night feel close and contained. My feet ached. My hands were numb around the duffel straps. Twice I stopped and considered turning back, finding somewhere to spend the night in town, approaching this in daylight with better preparation. But something pulled me forward, a strange gravity I couldn't name. The farmhouse appeared suddenly where the trees opened into a clearing, revealed by moonlight that seemed brighter after the forest's darkness. It was a 2-story craftsman structure, white with green trim, a wide front porch wrapping around 3 sides. A barn stood off to the left, dark and substantial. Beyond that, I could make out the shapes of other outbuildings and what looked like overgrown fields stretching toward the tree line. The property matched the map perfectly, and there, next to the front door, was a mailbox with a name painted in faded letters, Winters. I stood at the edge of the clearing for a long time, just looking. The house was beautiful in a weathered, forgotten way, like something from an old photograph. Nothing about it suggested abandonment. The porch was clean, the windows intact, the yard maintained even if the gardens had gone a bit wild. Someone had been taking care of this place, exactly as the gas station clerk had said. The question was who, and why, and how it connected to the mother I'd never known. I climbed the porch steps slowly, the wood solid beneath my feet. The front door had 2 locks. The keys from the envelope fit perfectly. The door swung open with barely a sound, well-oiled hinges moving smooth. Inside, I fumbled for a light switch and found one just inside the doorway. The lights came on, revealing an entryway that opened into a living room furnished like someone had just stepped out for the evening. A couch and 2 armchairs arranged around a stone fireplace. Bookshelves lining one wall. Photographs in frames on every surface. And dust, a fine layer over everything, undisturbed, marking time. I moved through the space slowly, setting my duffel down by the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. The air smelled like old wood and closed spaces, with an underlying scent I couldn't quite place, something floral and faint, like perfume lingering years after its application. The photographs drew me first. They covered the mantel, hung on the walls, occupied every flat surface. Most were of a young woman with dark hair like mine, with my same narrow face and wide-set eyes. In some photos she was alone, laughing at something off-camera or staring pensively at the ocean. In others she was with people I didn't recognize, friends, I assumed, from a life I knew nothing about. There were a few pictures of her pregnant, hand resting on her swollen belly, smiling with a joy so pure it hurt to look at. And there were photos of a baby, me, tiny and red-faced in hospital blankets, sleeping in a bassinet, being held against that same woman's chest, her face bent toward mine with an expression of fierce love. I picked up a frame from the mantel with shaking hands. The photo showed my mother sitting on this very porch, holding an infant against her shoulder, the barn visible in the background. Someone had written on the back in neat cursive, "Rachel and Ava, home at last, August 2007. 3 months before she supposedly died. 3 months before I supposedly became an orphan." The math didn't work. The story didn't work. Nothing about any of this worked according to the official record I'd grown up believing. The kitchen was pristine and oddly stocked, like someone had grocery shopped in preparation for my arrival. The refrigerator hummed with life, containing basics, milk dated from last week, eggs, butter, bread that was still fresh. The cabinets held dishes and dry goods, coffee in the freezer, tea in a canister by the stove. I stood in that kitchen, surrounded by evidence that someone had been here recently, and felt reality tilt sideways. This wasn't an abandoned property. This was maintained. Actively. Recently. For me. Upstairs, I found 3 bedrooms. One was clearly my mother's, the bed made with a faded quilt, clothes still hanging in the closet, jewelry on the dresser. The second was set up as a guest room, impersonal and neat. The third was a nursery, frozen in time. A white crib stood against one wall, mobile hanging overhead. A changing table stocked with supplies that had probably expired a decade ago. Stuffed animals arranged on shelves. And on the wall, my name spelled out in wooden letters painted yellow, AVA. I sat down hard on the nursery floor, my back against the crib, and let the weight of it all crash over me. This had been my room. My mother had prepared this space for me. She'd lived here with me, at least for a while, in this house that now legally belonged to me, but felt like a museum of a life I couldn't remember. The orphanage story was a lie. The car accident was a lie. Everything I'd been told about my origin was wrong, and I had no idea what the truth actually was. I spent an hour searching the other rooms, looking for answers. My mother's bedroom yielded a jewelry box full of simple pieces, a locket with a baby's picture inside, me, a bracelet engraved with my birth date, earrings that looked handmade. Her closet held clothes and styles from the late 2000s, casual pieces mixed with a few nicer dresses. Everything was preserved, but nothing explained the fundamental questions burning through my mind. In the back of her closet, behind a row of shoes, I found a cardboard box labeled Rachel, important, in the same handwriting from the envelope. Inside were documents that began to sketch the outline of a life. My mother's high school diploma from a town in Idaho, a college acceptance letter to Portland State, pay stubs from a coffee shop, then a bookstore, then a small accounting firm, medical records from her pregnancy with me. And beneath all that, journals, 5 of them, spiral-bound notebooks with worn covers. I carried them downstairs to the living room, turned on every lamp to push back the darkness pressing against the windows, and started reading. The journals began 2 years before I was born. My mother's handwriting was neat and controlled, her entries matter-of-fact at first. She wrote about moving to Oregon for a fresh start after college, finding work, making friends. She wrote about meeting someone named David, falling in love quickly, planning a future. Then the entries changed. David became controlling. He wanted to know where she was always. He checked her phone. He got angry when she talked to other people. The entries grew shorter, more careful, like she was afraid someone might read them. When she found out she was pregnant, David's behavior escalated. The journal entries from that period were brief and coded, but the fear bled through the careful words. He says the baby means I can never leave. He says he'll make sure I have nowhere to go. Called the women's shelter. They have space, but I need to plan this carefully. Elle says she can help. She says there's a safe place. I need to believe her. Elle, the woman from the bus station. She'd been part of this from the beginning. The entries documented my mother's escape. a carefully planned departure while David was at work, a friend's car, a drive north to this farm that belonged to Elle's family, a property they weren't using, a place off any grid David might search. We're home, my mother had written the day she arrived. It's perfect, remote but not isolated. Elle says we can stay as long as we need. She's putting the deed in Ava's name. Says when she's 18, this will be hers no matter what happens. A gift, a guarantee, a home she'll always have. I read through the months that followed, entries full of joy and relief. My mother wrote about preparing the nursery, about walks through the property, about feeling safe for the first time in a year. She wrote about my birth, about bringing me home to this house, about the overwhelming love she felt. The entries were detailed and warm, painting a picture of peaceful months where she healed and I grew and the farm became our sanctuary. But then, 6 months in, the tone shifted again. He found us. I don't know how. Elle says her brother might have mentioned something to the wrong person. David called yesterday. He knows about Elmwood. He knows about the farm. He says he's coming to take what's his. The next entry was dated 2 days later. I can't let him find Ava here. I can't let him know this place exists or he'll never stop watching it. Elle agrees. We have a plan. I'll take Ava to the city, place her somewhere safe, somewhere with records and official protections. Then I'll lead David away from here. I'll make him follow me. I'll take the danger with me and keep it away from my daughter. The following pages laid out her plan with heartbreaking precision. She would take me to a hospital in Portland, claim to be overwhelmed and unable to cope, surrender me to social services. The story would be that she was unstable, unprepared, that I'd be better off in the system. It would create official documentation, a paper trail, protection. David wouldn't be able to take me from state custody without exposing himself legally. And then she would disappear, drawing his attention away from Oregon, away from the farm, away from any place he might connect to me. Elle will maintain the farm. She'll keep it ready for Ava. When my daughter turns 18, Elle will find her and give her the deed. This house, this land, it'll be waiting. My gift to her. The home I couldn't give her now, but can promise her for later. A place that's hers, that no one can take away. I'll come back when it's safe. I'll explain everything. I'll tell her how much I love her, how hard this is, how I never wanted to leave but had no choice. I'll come back. The final entry was brief. Tomorrow I bring Ava to Portland. Elle is crying. I'm crying. But this is the only way to keep her safe. I'll lead him west, to California maybe, or Arizona. Somewhere far from here. I'll lose him somehow. And then I'll come home to my daughter. I promise I'm coming home. The date was February 15th, 2008. The day I entered the system. The day my official story began. The day my mother became a ghost. I sat on the living room floor surrounded by journals and documents, the physical evidence of a sacrifice I'd never known about. My mother hadn't died. She hadn't abandoned me. She'd given me up to keep me safe, then vanished into some other life to protect this place, this home she'd wanted me to have. The official story of her death, the car accident that supposedly killed her, must have been fabricated somehow, entered into records to close my case, to stop questions. A lie that became truth through repetition and paperwork. But the journals stopped 18 years ago. I had no way of knowing where she'd gone or what happened after she led David away. No way of knowing if she was still alive, still out there somewhere, still thinking about coming home. The farm had been maintained, the utilities paid, the deed transferred to my name, all of which suggested someone was still executing her plan, still keeping her promise. Elle, presumably. The woman from the bus station who'd waited 18 years to hand me that envelope at exactly the right moment. I walked through the house again as dawn began to lighten the windows, seeing it with new understanding. This wasn't just a farm. It was a message, a promise kept across nearly 2 decades. Evidence of a love so fierce it had shaped every decision my mother made in those last months of our time together. She'd given up everything, her home, her daughter, her entire life, to keep me safe from someone I'd never met, never known was a threat. And she'd left me this place as proof that I'd always mattered, always been wanted, always had somewhere to belong. The barn drew my attention as the sun rose fully, its old red paint glowing in the early light. I'd been avoiding it, focusing on the house, but something about the morning made me brave enough to cross the yard. The barn door was unlocked, sliding open on a track that still worked smoothly. Inside was mostly empty, just farm equipment older than me and bales of hay that smelled like time. But at the far end, visible in the light streaming through gaps in the wall boards, was a small office or storage room. The office door was closed but not locked. Inside I found a desk, a filing cabinet, and more boxes of papers. Bank statements showing regular payments from an account I'd need to investigate. Property tax receipts. Utility bills. Maintenance records from a local handyman company. All the documentation of keeping this place alive and waiting. And on the desk, placed carefully where someone entering would see it immediately, was a newer envelope with my name on it in the same handwriting as the note from the bus station. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a letter dated just 1 week ago. Dear Ava, if you're reading this, you found your way home. Your mother would be so happy. I've kept my promise to her for 18 years, maintaining the farm, making sure it was ready for you. The account that pays for everything is set up to continue. You don't need to worry about expenses. I've included information about accessing it. Your mother is alive. I won't tell you where because she made me promise not to. Not until she knows for certain that David can never hurt you or her again. She's been moving for almost 2 decades, staying ahead of him, keeping him looking in wrong directions. Recently, he stopped searching. His wife mentioned something about him giving up, moving on. Your mother thinks it might finally be safe. The letter continued. She's been here, you know. Not inside. She's too afraid David might still be watching somehow, but close. She's seen you grow up from a distance. School photos I managed to get from the orphanage website. Your social media posts. She knows you love reading and that you're good at art and that you survived the system stronger than most kids do. She's proud of you, and she's planning to come home soon. Maybe this spring. Maybe when she can be absolutely certain you're safe. I've been getting the house ready for that, making sure everything works, stocking food. I thought she'd be first, but you beat her here. Fate, maybe. Meant to be. This is your home, Ava. It always has been. Welcome back. L. There was also a business card for a lawyer in Portland, a note saying he had more information about my mother's situation if I wanted it, and a phone number with a simple message. This reaches me if you need anything. I check it daily. I stood in that barn office as full morning arrived, reading the letter 3 times, until the words blurred together. My mother was alive. She'd been alive this entire time, living some parallel existence while I grew up without her, making the sacrifice she'd thought necessary to keep me safe. And she was coming home. Eventually, when circumstances aligned, when she could be sure. I thought about waiting, about settling into this house and hoping she'd appear. But 18 years was long enough. If she was out there somewhere, believing she had to stay away for my protection, maybe it was time to tell her protection wasn't necessary anymore. Maybe it was time to find each other deliberately instead of waiting for perfect safety that might never come. But first, I needed to be here. To make this place lived in instead of preserved. To turn it from a museum into an actual home. I spent that first day cleaning, opening windows to let in the ocean air, wiping away dust, putting fresh sheets on the bed in my mother's room. I walked the property, discovering an overgrown vegetable garden that could be restored, a small orchard of apple trees, a path through the woods that led to a cliff overlooking the Pacific. Everything was beautiful in a wild, neglected way. Everything was waiting for attention, for care, for someone to bring it back to life. I could do that. I could live here and make it whole again while I figured out how to find my mother, how to tell her it was safe to come home. That evening I built a fire in the living room fireplace, more for comfort than warmth, and sat watching flames transform wood into light. I thought about the version of my life I'd believed until yesterday. Orphan, product of the system, fundamentally alone. And I thought about the truth I was still piecing together. Daughter of someone who loved me enough to disappear, heir to a place prepared specifically for me, part of a story much larger and stranger than I'd imagined. Neither version felt entirely real. Both existed simultaneously, competing for space in my understanding. Night fell completely, the kind of darkness that only exists far from cities. I should have been scared, alone in an unfamiliar house in the middle of nowhere with more questions than answers. But I felt oddly peaceful, like something in me recognized this place even if my conscious mind held no memories of it. I'd been here before, briefly, as an infant in my mother's arms. Maybe some part of me remembered. Maybe that's why walking through these rooms felt less like exploration and more like return. Around 10 o'clock, Movement caught my eye through the living room window. Lights in the barn. Not the office where I'd been earlier, but the main space, visible through gaps in the wall boards. My heart rate spiked immediately, adrenaline flooding my system. Someone was here. Someone was in the barn. The rational explanations cycled through my mind quickly. Elle checking on something. A handyman doing late maintenance. Teenagers using the empty property for whatever teenagers do. But beneath the rational part, something else whispered. A possibility so unlikely I was afraid to even think it fully. I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen and stepped out onto the porch, my breath visible in the cold November air. The barn lights flickered and moved like someone with a lantern walking around inside. I crossed the yard slowly, my footsteps quiet on the dirt path. The barn door was open a foot, yellow light spilling out. My hand shook as I pulled it wider, stepping inside. The lantern sat on a hay bale in the middle of the space, casting shifting shadows up the walls. And standing next to it, turning at the sound of my entrance, was a woman with dark hair streaked with gray, my same narrow face aged by years of running, my same wide-set eyes now lined with exhaustion and hope and fear. "Ava," she said, and her voice broke on my name. My mother. Here. Real. Alive, not just in Elle's letter, but standing 10 feet away, wearing jeans and a worn jacket, looking at me like I might disappear if she blinked. "I was just checking," she continued, words tumbling out fast. "Elle told me you'd arrived, and I couldn't wait anymore. I couldn't stay away knowing you were here. I know I should have prepared you, should have let you settle, but I've waited 18 years to see you, and She stopped, seeming to realize she was rambling, tears streaming down her face unchecked. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for all of it. For leaving you. For the years you spent alone. For not being there. I thought I was protecting you, but maybe I crossed the space between us before she could finish, before doubt or fear or the weight of 18 years could stop me. I'd spent my entire life feeling like I didn't belong anywhere, like I was temporary, like no one had ever wanted me enough to stay. And here was proof, living and breathing and crying in a barn at midnight, that I'd been wanted desperately, that someone had sacrificed everything for me, that I'd never actually been alone, even when it felt most like I was. I walked into my mother's arms and let her hold me the way she'd held that infant in the photographs, fierce and protective and full of a love I was only beginning to understand. We stood there for a long time, not speaking, just holding on while 18 years of separation tried to compress into a single moment. She smelled like wood smoke and the ocean and something floral I recognized from the house. Her perfume, lingering after all this time. Her arms around me felt familiar in a way that made no logical sense, but felt true anyway. Maybe we remember more than we think. Maybe some connections exist below conscious memory, written into us at a level words can't touch. "I have so many questions," I finally said, my voice muffled against her shoulder. She laughed, a sound caught between joy and sorrow. "I know. I'll answer all of them. I promise. We have time now." We walked back to the house together, my mother moving slowly like she was afraid the night might vanish and reveal this as a dream. Inside, she looked around the living room with something approaching reverence. "Elle did an amazing job maintaining it," she said quietly. "It looks exactly like the day I left." She picked up the photograph from the mantel, the one of her holding infant me on the porch. "This was taken the morning I brought you home from the hospital. Best day of my life." She set it down carefully and turned to face me. "I know the story Elle told you. I know you've read the journals. So you understand why I did what I did." I nodded, settling onto the couch while she took the armchair opposite. "David," I said. "My father." The word tasted strange. My mother flinched. "Biologically, yes. But he was never a father. He was dangerous. And he spent years looking for us." Elle's brother mentioned Elmwood to someone who knew David. "It got back to him. He called me, told me he'd find this place, told me he'd take you from me. I couldn't risk it. The system was the only place I knew he couldn't reach you without exposing himself legally. So I made it look like I was an unfit mother who gave you up. It destroyed me, but it kept you safe." She told me the rest of her story through the long hours of that night. How she'd led David on a chase through California and Nevada, always staying visible enough that he'd follow, never visible enough that he'd catch her. How she'd eventually established a new identity in Arizona, working under the table, living in cash-only apartments, checking obsessively for any sign he'd found me or the farm. How Elle had sent her updates about me, school pictures, report cards, descriptions of the girl I was becoming. "I've watched you grow up in photographs," she said. "I know it's not the same as being there. I know I missed everything that mattered. But I've loved you every single day. Why come back now?" I asked. She smiled, tired but genuine. "David died 6 months ago. Heart attack." Elle found the obituary and sent it to me. "For the first time in 18 years, I knew for certain you were safe. There was no one left to hurt you. But I was still scared. Scared you'd hate me for leaving. Scared you'd think I'd abandoned you. Scared I'd lost any right to be your mother." She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. "Elle told me you'd come to the farm. She said I should wait, let you adjust. But I saw the lights on in the house, and I couldn't stay away. I needed to know if you'd understand." I thought about what to say, how to explain the complicated tangle of emotions filling my chest. Anger at the years lost. Gratitude for the sacrifice made. Grief for the childhood we'd never had together. Hope for what might still be possible. "I don't know if I understand everything yet," I said carefully. "But I understand you try to protect me. I understand this place, this home you made sure I'd have, is proof of that. And I'm here. We're both here. Maybe that's enough to start with." My mother's face crumpled with relief. "That's more than I deserve," she whispered. "But I'll take it. I'll take whatever you're willing to give me." We stayed up until dawn, filling in the gaps of 18 years, trading stories and histories like gifts. She told me about the person she'd been before fear and running changed her. I told her about surviving the system, about the group homes and foster families and social workers who'd shaped my trajectory. We moved through the house together as the sun rose, my mother showing me details I'd missed, a growth chart marked on a doorframe in the nursery, her favorite reading spot by the upstairs window, the loose board in the living room floor where she'd hidden emergency cash. Each small revelation added depth to the story, made the house more real, more lived in, more ours. "What happens now?" I asked as morning light filled the kitchen and we made coffee together, moving around each other with surprising ease. My mother leaned against the counter, cradling her mug. "That's up to you. This is your home. I'll put it in your name specifically so no one could ever take it from you. I won't impose on that. But if you'd let me stay, even just for a little while, I'd like to be here. To make up for lost time. To be your mother again, if you'll have me." She looked vulnerable saying it, like she expected rejection, like she didn't believe she deserved the second chance she was asking for. I thought about the empty space my mother had occupied my entire life, the questions about where I came from and who I might have been if circumstances were different. I thought about the farm. This place prepared for me across 18 years, maintained by a promise and a friendship strong enough to span decades. I thought about the woman standing in front of me who'd sacrificed her entire existence to keep me safe from a danger I'd never even known threatened me. "Stay," I said. "Not just for a while. Stay and help me figure out what this place can be. We'll both be learning who we are here. We'll both be starting over." The relief on her face was profound. "I'd like that," she said quietly. "I'd like that more than anything." We stood in the kitchen of the farmhouse as morning became day. Two people who shared DNA and a complicated history, beginning the careful work of becoming family. It wouldn't be simple. We'd missed too much time, accumulated too much pain, to expect easy resolution. But we had this place, this home that had waited patiently for us both. We had time now. We had safety. We had the foundation to build something neither of us had experienced in 18 years, stability, permanence, home. Later that morning, after my mother had finally gone upstairs to sleep in her old bedroom, I walked out to the cliff overlooking the ocean. The Pacific stretched endlessly before me, gray-blue and powerful under the November sky. I thought about the path that had led me here. Every group home placement, every disappointed social worker, every night I'd felt fundamentally unwanted. I thought about the woman at the bus station, timing her appearance perfectly, trusting that I'd be brave enough or desperate enough to follow the breadcrumbs north. I thought about Elle, whoever she was, keeping a promise for 18 years, maintaining a farm for a baby who grew into a stranger she'd never met. I thought about my mother, living in the margins for nearly 2 decades, sacrificing proximity for safety, choosing my well-being over her own happiness every single day. The story I'd believed about my origins, abandoned by a mother who died, raised by a system that did its best, was comfortable in its simplicity. The truth was messier, more complicated, stranger than I could have imagined. But it was also more hopeful, because the truth meant I'd been loved. Desperately. Sacrificially. The kind of love that builds plans across decades, that maintains empty houses against future need, that gives up everything for a child's safety. I'd spent 18 years thinking no one wanted me. I'd been wrong. I turned back toward the farmhouse, its white walls bright in the morning light, smoke rising from the chimney where I'd left the fire burning. My mother was inside, sleeping in the home she'd prepared for me before I could remember, finally returned after years of exile. We had so much to figure out: how to live together, how to build relationship from scratch, how to turn this museum of lost time into an actual home. But we had the foundation. We had this place, this land, this structure that had held space for us, even when we couldn't hold space for each other. I walked back to the house slowly, letting the reality settle into my bones. I was home, not in the sense of familiar routine or comfortable habit, but in the deeper sense of belonging, of rootedness, of having a place that was mine not by accident, but by design. My mother had given me that. Elle had protected it. And now I was here to claim it, to live in it, to make it real through daily existence rather than patient waiting. The future was uncertain. Our relationship was untested. The farm needed work, and the house needed updating, and we needed to figure out how to be mother and daughter after 18 years apart. But none of that changed the fundamental truth settling into my chest like warmth spreading from a flame. I was home. Finally, permanently, completely home. And my mother was here with me, no longer running, no longer hiding, no longer sacrificing her own existence for mine. We were both home, together, the way she'd always planned, the way it was always meant to be. I climbed the porch steps, my hand running along the railing my mother had touched countless times, and stepped through the front door into the future we'd build together. It would be hard work. It would take time. But we had time now. And we had this place, solid and real and waiting, ready to become whatever we needed it to be, ready to be home.